she is. Come on.
Your Honest, bringing them to a spot where he says Natalie's body is.
He points there and says, this is where Natalie was buried.
What happened to Natalie? I mean, that's the big question.
Kissed her goodbye, said I love you, have a great time.
Who's our special guest today?
Never could I have imagined that would be the last time.
Natalie Holloway disappeared on her graduation.
This story, the media came in and they stayed. People couldn't get enough.
It is now that I ask the world to help me.
We thought this was going to be over in one day. We're going to get Natalie. Everybody's going to be happy. They're going to go back home.
The last anybody remembers, Natalie was seen driving off in a vehicle with a young man.
Ron Vandersloot was just such an ass. What will you do about it? This is where I brought her. I thought, you're it.
Are you guilty?
He needed money. He'd call the media. He'd say, listen, I'll tell you my story.
He contacted me. He says, if you give me $250,000, I will give you information on the whereabouts of Natalie Holloway.
It's mind-blowing.
He will strike again. What the is he doing in Peru?
Another young woman, 5 years the day after the disappearance of Natalie Holloway.
Is that just a coincidence? Or is he that evil?
I was going to hang on to him till my last breath.
It's May 2010, and a 21-year-old young Peruvian woman named Stephanie Flores doesn't come home one night. She goes missing.
The daughter of a former Peruvian presidential candidate.
She was last seen in the early morning hours of Sunday.
As a parent, this is the thing you worry about the most. This is the stuff of nightmares.
The family went crazy since the day she had disappeared.
There's no evidence, there's no trail to follow.
You cling to every ounce of hope, but you fear the worst.
And because she's from a wealthy family, it's believed that Stephanie's been kidnapped.
But as the hours tick by, and one day turns into 2 days, and the ransom call doesn't come in, well, everybody kind of has the same idea. This isn't good. You know, maybe this isn't a kidnapping.
Stephanie's family is desperate. They do anything to try to track down her last steps. Who was she with?
Tuesday, somebody tell us that Stephanie went to the casino.
The Flores family knows the people at the casino, so the casino folks allow them to look at the surveillance video.
On the security video that is later released to the media, the family actually spots Stephanie.
Tape by tape, camera by camera, they're able to follow her through the casino.
She takes a seat next to what appears to be a young man. The two have some sort of a conversation.
Then they see them leave together.
So now they have what they believe to be an actual image of this man.
They say, we've got a name for this kid.
I went to the internet and I put that name in Google.
She types in Joran Vandersloot, and what comes up is actually shocking. Hundreds and hundreds of articles
About this man.
He's the Playboy suspect.
17-year-old Joran Vandersloot.
Implicated in the disappearance of an American woman.
They search for missing American teen Natalie Holloway.
The disappearance of Natalie Holloway
From the island of Aruba exactly 5 years earlier.
And now a name that made headlines 5 years ago is back in the news. Joran Vandersloot.
Joran Vandersloot.
Joran Vandersloot.
Joran Vandersloot.
It was Memorial Day in 2005, and my phone rang from a number that I didn't recognize. They tell me that my daughter Natalie is missing, and that no one has seen her. Natalie and her class were doing a senior trip to Aruba. Of course, as a parent, you worry sending your child out into the world for the first time alone, but they were promised chaperones, so you expect that your child is going to be watched.
It was a way to celebrate the
fact that they made it through high school and had their lives in front of them.
Aruba is considered to be a very safe, beautiful Caribbean island.
For a lot of Americans, Aruba does not feel that foreign, and that's part of its appeal. When you go down the strip, there's a Carlos and Charlie's, there's a Marriott, there's a Holiday Inn. I mean, blink and you can really feel like you were in Fort Lauderdale.
She mentioned that they were planning a senior graduation trip to Aruba. I've never heard of Aruba. It's only gonna be gone 4 days. Okay. I remember that last day, she came to wake me up. I helped her get her bag out of the car and just kissed her goodbye, said, I love you, have a great time. And then she entered the door, and the door closed. Never could I have imagined that would be the last time.
She got the call and she knew Natalie was in trouble.
Snap. You know, it's instant. Something is terribly wrong. I had to get to Aruba now.
Beth immediately set off to get on a plane to Aruba.
Some family men that I've known for a long time, and the woman that called me about that Natalie was missing decided to come on the plane too. We landed in Aruba on the same day I got the call. In my little simple mind, I was flying into an island with a few tiki torches and maybe some huts. And I was like, wow, it just seemed vast.
Beth has come down with a bunch of people from Alabama, and they arrange for the local Arubians that they meet at the airport to be their guides.
And then they explained to us that this is a case of a missing person. So then they said that we're going to hire you guys. We want people that we can trust, that we've met, that can be with us the whole 9 yards. We thought it was something to be just for a few hours.
Beth is fielding calls from various people who were on the trip, and she's piecing together a timeline where Natalie was last seen, who she was with.
We all pile into this van, and we went to the last place that she was seen, Carlos and Charlie's.
Carlos and Charlie's was like any other club that you can go in there, you can dance, and you have shots, they have shows. You see everybody in Carlos and Charlie's. That's the club.
The night that Natalie disappeared, I was at Carlos and Charlie's with a group of friends, and these kids were all like 16, 17, 18 years old, and they were just jumping and singing and playing this Sweet Home Alabama over and over. Sweet Home Alabama.
The last anybody remembers, Natalie was seen driving off in a vehicle. The young man, he seemed like a tourist. He seemed harmless. Everybody assumed that she was going to make it back to the Holiday Inn fine that night, and she just never showed up again.
I knew something was terribly wrong. This was not now. Went to the front desk, and there was a night manager there. We had just a few threads to relay to this person at the Holiday Inn, and she said, oh, you're talking about Huron Vandersloot. I knew it wasn't good if she knew who he was.
They would get surveillance tape, and Beth, for the first time, was able to lay her eyes on Huron Vandersloot.
We've got it, let's go. Police officials accompany us to the Vandersloot home.
Huron says, yeah, okay, I was with her.
At that moment, I thought, you're it. I don't think I've ever felt afraid to get back into Aruba because my daughter is there. That's the last place that I know that she has been.
It's been close to 15 years since Beth Holloway first set foot on the island of Aruba looking for her daughter Natalie. This past summer, we brought her back with us.
It feels good to come back in this frame of mind where I'm
not searching for anything that the Aruban officials or people have to give me.
The island of Aruba is not Natalie's life. This is where Natalie's life ended, but this was not her life. Natalie was born in Memphis, Tennessee, October the 21st, 1986. Not too long after, Matt, her brother, he was born in Memphis as well.
When Natalie was just 6, her parents, Beth and Dave, divorced.
Then I met Jug and married Jug in 2000 and moved to Mountain Brook, Alabama. It's a beautiful community.
These were people who were comfortable. There were Mercedes, there were BMWs, there were corporate executives. They were wealthier than most of us.
And Natalie was entering into junior high school.
She made friends right away and fit in right away.
Natalie was a beautiful girl, involved in the church, always had a smile on her face, always so happy and energetic and outgoing.
They called her Hootie.
There's Hootie.
So Hootie Hoo Holloway.
Who's our special guest today?
It's Hootie.
Hootie Hoo Holloway.
Hi, friend. Just, sitting in the back, cruising over to my place. The beach was a blast. I had the best time of my life.
Natalie was so remarkable. The grade year that these girls start trying out for this dance team. It's called Dorians. She continued to make that dance team.
It is perfect, but on paper, Natalie certainly appeared to be. She's heading to University of Alabama in the fall, straight A's, probably going to be a doctor.
It was all I could do to hang on to her, all of her dreams and all of her goals.
By the time Beth makes her way to Aruba back in 2005, her daughter Natalie has been missing for almost 24 hours. Beth tries to retrace her daughter's last steps, and she figures out that the guy she was last seen with is Joran Vandersloot.
Joran was born in the Netherlands in 1987. 3 years later, his parents moved to Aruba, so he really considers himself a local.
Coincidentally, Joran had been spending a lot of time at the casino that was attached to Natalie's hotel.
And at some point, they looked at surveillance tape because they knew that she had been in the casino. And the casino manager actually found the tape. And Beth, for the first time, was able to lay her eyes on Joran Vandersloot. If Natalie Holloway was someone who spent Saturday nights maybe with her mom and made cookies, Joran Vandersloot was not someone who was making cookies with his mom and dad. You know what I mean? Joran Vandersloot was in the casinos. Joran Vandersloot was at Carlos and Charlie's hitting on the American girls.
In the video of Joran's 15th birthday, which was 2 years before Natalie disappeared, he is having a great time dancing with all the girls.
He struck you as the type of kid who would hit on 10 women knowing that one would say yes, and the 9 who said no, he didn't much care about.
It's pretty clear that this is a guy who is not lacking in confidence.
Okay, this poem is about some of the few memories I have from when I was still young.
Joran Vandersloot was a headstrong, free-willed young man who was accustomed to getting what he wanted.
What I saw on the footage from the Excelsior Casino was Natalie was seated at this blackjack table. Once I saw him, I was like, we've got it, let's go. It's time to go to the police now. We finally get 2 Aruban police officials to accompany us to the Vandersloot home. I remember the police turning on their siren.
Now, you've got an Aruban police car coming up to the Vandersloot home, along with 2 van loads of very angry very young Alabama parents. Euron's father comes out. He starts to talk quietly with a couple of the Aruban officers while the Alabama people, the contingent, stands out by the van in the street.
The gray Honda that Natalie was last seen getting into is parked outside the Vandersloot residence. And Deepak Calvo and Euron Vandersloot are standing out in the gravel driveway.
Deepak Kalpo was a friend of Yoren's. He and his brother Satish were actually seen leaving with Yoren and Natalie that night. In fact, it was their car that they all left in.
And Euron says, yeah, okay, I was with her. You know, we fooled around a little. I dropped her back at the Holiday Inn. That's all we know.
And then he describes, I don't even want to get it, but he graphically describes the sexual activity that he engaged in with her. Okay, and that was just like over the top. The men that I was traveling with, they were all fathers. And you can imagine the tempers.
And they start yelling. Tell us where she is. Come on, tell us where she is.
Bickering and yelling, you will tell them stop, just talk like normal people. This threatening and stuff like that, we're not used to that.
Finally, Euron said, I'll show you where I dropped her off.
So, Yoren agrees to take the whole group back to Natalie's hotel where he says he dropped her off.
He says that she got out of the car and that she stumbled and that she hit her head, and 2 security guards helped Natalie up. And he says those are the last 2 people that he left Natalie with.
Little does Beth know that the story that she just heard from Yoren Vandersloot is the first of many that he is going to tell over the years about what really happened to her daughter, Natalie.
He was just hitting his chest, and what do you want me to do about it? This is where I brought her. At that moment, that's when I thought, you're it. Did I know what was to come? No. But I knew that I was going to hang on to him till my last breath.
The morning after, Beth has this confrontation with Euron and Deepak. She goes and tries to file a missing persons report with the local police. Their initial reaction is Natalie was not officially missing yet.
The police tell me, this happens a lot, so don't really worry about her too much. She'll show back up. Don't worry about it.
Beth and the Alabama people, with the help of the local press, start to organize search parties, looking for anything, a piece of clothing.
We all had to take turns to go to Aruba. You signed up for a shift, literally, because there was so much going on.
Everybody wanted to help. Everybody.
Early on, the government let every government employee off work. Could you imagine a whole country was out searching for her?
But right from the start, the pace of the investigation was extremely frustrating.
I don't think the Aruban authorities took this seriously enough, quickly enough.
I assure you that every lead is being worked out.
The Alabama group would go to all the Dutch bars, they would go to the casinos, they were just out looking to find Euron. They just wanted to hassle him.
We had to do something, because it seemed like nothing was being done.
Necessary that you let us do our work.
The Aruba chief of police walks up to us and says, I don't want cowboy stuff going on down here. We're the police, we'll handle it. They didn't like us, and we didn't like them. It was a marriage made in heaven.
Hundreds and hundreds of leads were coming in.
Every blonde that was seen on Aruba, it seemed, got phoned in.
We always felt like with every lead, with every tip, it was always as if we were about to get her. Early Thursday morning, police had the security tapes ready from the lobby entrance where Euron said that he dropped Natalie off. And as we watched the tape and the night turned into daylight on the screen, Natalie never appeared.
The story that Yoren told them wasn't true.
So I thought, now, okay, this is it. They can go get these men and arrest them. It didn't happen.
Natalie, you can reach me on your cell phone.
When Beth felt like the police weren't getting anywhere,
I will stay here until I find you, Natalie.
She used the weapon that she had, which was the media.
Natalie Holloway's mother and stepfather made no secret of their growing dissatisfaction with this investigation.
Reached a breaking point.
Deborah Roberts has just arrived in the island's capital.
Terry, tomorrow marks 1 week since 18-year-old Natalie... I was on the island and began broadcasting around day 6. And by that time, there was a full media... A few days after I got there, I was able to convince Beth to sit down for her first television interview.
Missing in Paradise. The Alabama teen at the heart of a massive search.
She was absolutely determined to find her daughter and to find her daughter alive.
I know in my heart that we are going to find Natalie.
Will you even let your mind entertain the possibility that you might not find her?
No, there again, that's not an option.
I also interviewed Natalie's father, Dave. By then, he had joined the search and was also trying to help find his daughter. Why do you still feel that every day you've got to go out there?
You know, I just can't sit in a hotel room. You'll drive yourself crazy pacing the floor, and I just feel like I have to be out there looking.
Just keep going, I think up around the beach area.
You look at the map of Aruba and you think, this couldn't be that hard. You know, it's 5 miles long, 20 or 25, 30 miles long. We'll find her easy.
It's any parent's worst nightmare, Deborah. There is no other worst nightmare. It's not her. We will just keep looking.
Beth was so approachable, and she was every mom. And I think the way that Beth was talking from her heart.
Please keep looking for her, okay? I appreciate it so much, okay?
People wanted to help her.
Thank you.
What surprised me was just the level to which Beth seemed to be keeping it together.
Please help bring her home.
Thank you. But then there was a point in time where she kind of broke down.
I went back to Natalie's hotel room, and I had no more human strength left. I thought, I've got to get out of here. I've got to go find a place to pray. So I found this taxi. He took me to the other side of the island. There was a small, beautiful little chapel, Alta Vista Chapel, that was sitting on the hillside overlooking the sea. And I walked up to the cross, and it just fell to my knees. And I was just crying and praying and just begging God to give her back. This is the only place on the island where I could come to feel close to Natalie. Yes, you lay your burdens at the cross, but there was a hell of a lot of work that needed to be done, and I got busy.
After days of little to no progress, this morning they have been arrested.
Are you guilty?
They'd had 10 days to lawyer up, 10 days to corroborate their stories, and 10 days to clean up their mess of whatever that was.
Innocent people most commonly tell a consistent story, and there's a begins to change.
Yoran and his 2 friends are confronted with the fact that they lied, that they had never dropped off Natalie at the hotel.
A different story has emerged. The guys say that the Calpo brothers dropped Yoran and Natalie off at the beach where they fooled around.
Then they just laid there and watched the stars until Natalie was apparently going in and out of sleep. And then Yoran said he wanted to go home, and he left her sleeping there on the beach.
The story keeps changing, and the truth is getting further and further away.
Throughout these first weeks, Beth Holloway was desperately trying to meet with Joran van der Sloot's parents.
Joran's father was an attorney. He was training to be a judge. And there were allegations that Joran was being protected because of his father's relationships.
Greta Van Susteren live on Island.
Shep, I covered the story, and I made waves covering the story. I said, let's go over to the Van der Sloot home. Let's get some answers.
Hello? Is anybody home? I'm Natalie's mom. I just want to give you a prayer card.
Paulus van der Sloot, the father of Joran van der Sloot, came out to the gate Storms a camera or something? We sit down at the dining room table.
I wanted to be that close to Paulus Vandersloot. I wanted to make him feel in some way how I was feeling.
Beth was stern and direct. Anita, Euron's mother, was crying, sobbing. Paulus, who was sitting next to me, was perspiring like something I have never seen in my life.
I thought, this man is the most pathetic human being I've ever seen, because he knows what happened. He knew.
Now there seems to be a shift, a little bit of a backlash against Beth.
You could feel the tide turn. They were done with me. They were done with the media. They were done with everyone.
What is wrong with you? You have overstayed your bloody welcome in our island. Go home.
In Aruba, the search for
new details in the case of Natalie Holloway.
Natalie Holloway's mother.
Alabama teenager Natalie Holloway.
In this story, the media came in. People couldn't get enough of the Natalie Holloway story.
Beth Holloway seems to realize that the only way she's going to keep the pressure on and maybe find her daughter is to just keep talking.
Mike and sit and talk. I mean, that's what you could do.
Beth, thanks for being with us again.
7 hits in the morning or something like that?
Beth, it's Diane.
Yes, hi Diane.
Good morning.
7 hits at night, 3 hours later, up, do it again, up, do it again, up, do it again.
The Natalie Holloway story just dominated. It was a sensation. It was also one in a string of stories that were grabbing headlines about missing, attractive young women. Women who all happened to be white.
Levy was last seen on April 30th. 27-year-old Lacey Peterson.
Every night, there were shows looking at what we called, the missing white female, because they were almost always stories of missing or murdered young white women.
It was apparent to a lot of people that there was this obsession, almost to the exclusion of anyone else who might also have been missing.
These shows were bringing in huge ratings. By far the largest was the story of Natalie Holloway.
The police would say that the media got in their way and that we were trying to force their hand into doing certain things.
1 month into this investigation, there is intense scrutiny, and Joran and his 2 buddies are all in jail. But there's a problem.
There was not enough evidence. There was no body, there's no, let's say there's a blood trail found or something. There was just a big suspicion.
And then a major blow to Beth Holloway.
In Aruba, 2 of 3 men held in the disappearance of Natalie Holloway are now free.
Deepak K and Sitish K will be immediately released.
The day the Cowposts were released, it just crushed another level.
It is now that I ask the world to help me. 2 suspects were released yesterday who were involved in a violent crime against my daughter. Help me by not allowing these 2 to get away with this crime.
She had a press conference and blah, blah, and I think we got in trouble for calling the Cowposts criminals or something, but so what?
The Aruban legal system was being criticized for not holding some of the suspects longer.
There are still many things we have to clarify, to investigate, to ask questions, so there is a lot of work to do.
They released them because they weren't charged.
The authorities now say that the cases against the Cowpo brothers are completely dismissed.
Calling them criminals when in fact they'd just been released from jail and there were no charges really turned public sentiment against her.
Questions?
People out there that are putting Arubians down, go home. If you don't like it, go home.
The entire dynamics of the island turned on me. All the people that were helping, all the people that I felt we were working together, and you could feel the shift. You could feel the tide turn. It was not okay for me to call their citizens criminals.
You have overstayed your bloody welcome in our island.
The people on the island ultimately wanted Beth to go home.
In the perception of most people, Aruba was doing everything to solve the case. And that's why some people turned against her.
This is an ABC News special report.
Finally, something did break the news cycle of Natalie.
Hurricane Katrina is now a Category 5 hurricane, massive.
We're dealing with one of the worst natural disasters in our nation's history.
It was no surprise everyone in the media went to Katrina. I mean, Katrina was a catastrophic storm in the United States, so naturally everybody did leave.
So many people affected by this storm. The destruction is just incredible.
And as soon as that happened, it was over.
The story fizzled off for the media, but not for Beth. Beth still doesn't know where her daughter is.
We're in downtown.
This is Canal Street. And
While the cameras are trained on New Orleans, Joran Vandersloot is being released from jail.
Are you guilty?
They do have rules in Aruba about how long you can detain a suspect without a charge. They didn't feel that they were able to charge Joran with anything.
I know that he was responsible for the demise of Natalie. And he's a monster.
There was nothing that could tie him to Natalie's disappearance. And most of all, there was no body.
I knew at that point it was time to take it up at the home front because the suspects were all out. And I made a pledge that I will share everything that I have learned. So that's what I did. First off, Dr. Phil. And then Dr. Phil went on TV and everybody's attitude changed.
We need to tell these people we will never set foot on Aruban soil again until you stand up and do what you have to do for this young woman.
They were asking to boycott Aruba.
There's 270 million people over here that are going to forget you people exist as a destination and
terrible to hear that.
Our sole bread and butter is tourism. A lot of flights start to cancel. Of course, the tourism went down.
She was going to do whatever it took to punish them. And if it meant taking Aruba down, she's going to take Aruba down.
I was trying to destroy an island in Iran, so I was on a mission. They destroyed me, and I thought, well, I'm going after them.
Joran Vandersloot, his guilt or innocence doesn't matter. He's now an international celebrity of notoriety.
So he decided that he was going to start talking about it.
Once Joran agrees to come to New York for an interview, Beth's attorney realizes this is an opportunity.
Are you ready to tell the truth?
A major development this morning in the Natalie Holloway case. A judge in Aruba is releasing prime suspect Joran Vandersloot from jail.
Joran Vandersloot is back in the Netherlands after being released from custody in Aruba.
After Joran got released from jail in the late summer of 2005, he was in Holland going to school.
I think Joran missed the media attention and missed being the focus, even though the focus was not in a way most people would want. And he decided to fly to New York to do an interview with ABC News.
Have a seat, let them look at you. They're gonna put some powder on you just so you don't shine. It's not makeup. I'm not a judge. I'm asking you the questions. This is your opportunity. So don't let me drive it. You drive it. How do you think you've been portrayed in all this?
I think I've been portrayed unfairly. I think it's about time that people get to see the other side of the story.
Are you ready to tell the truth?
Yeah. I tried to convince her to go back to her hotel. I even jokingly picked her up in my arms to try and take her to the hotel. She said, just put me down.
Seems a little odd, though, doesn't it? Yeah. That she's fallen asleep, but she doesn't want to go back to her hotel?
No, she didn't want to go back to her hotel. She wanted me to stay with her there, but I wanted to go home.
Do you believe she was in a vulnerable position the way you left her?
Yes.
Do you remember the last time you saw her?
Yeah, the last time I saw her, she was sitting on the sand by the ocean.
Did it seem like a wrong thing to do, leaving a girl on the beach like that?
At that moment in time, for me, it wasn't the wrong thing, but it's definitely the wrong thing to do. I mean, it's not something a real man would do. It's not normal. It's not right at all.
Did you kill Natalie Holloway?
No.
Did you harm Natalie Holloway?
No.
And why should
no reason to believe me?
When Beth's attorney finds out that Yoran's going to be in New York, on U.S. soil, he realizes this is his opportunity to serve Yoran with that wrongful death lawsuit.
I had gotten a heads up with 1 day's notice that Yoran and his dad were going to be coming into New York. We placed a private investigator on Yoran's flight. When it landed in JFK, he not only served Yoran, but he took a photo of Yoran coming down the aisle towards him before he served him.
The judge rules that New York doesn't have jurisdiction over this case.
Tonight, on a special edition of 2020, Natalie Holloway, Joran Vandersloot, an explosive new account.
In 2008, an unbelievable development.
All eyes are on Aruba tonight to see what happens next after the explosive broadcast last night in Holland of a tape that has blown open the case of Natalie Holloway.
Dutch journalist Peter de Vries sets up hidden cameras in a car where Joran Vandersloot is going to be riding. De Vries says those cameras catch Vandersloot actually admitting to being involved in Natalie's death.
Peter de Vries over the Netherlands had orchestrated individuals to befriend Yoran and record a confession out of Yoran in a confidential moment.
I just think that I'm incredibly lucky that she's never been found. Because if they find that girl, I'm in deep. And we walked along the beach, and I was kissing her and stuff, but she doesn't look too good, you know? But she wanted it. She really wanted it. And all of a sudden, Patrick.
To watch Yoran discuss the events that unfolded and how Natalie, sort of convulsed, how she suffered, was really stunning.
But no, I don't think she'll ever be found.
That video did seem like Yoran uncovered. Like, this is the real Yoran.
Will this tape become the evidence that prosecutors so desperately desire?
We saw those tapes too, and we consider it serious information. We are determined to solve this case.
So it was very surprising when nothing happened to Yoran. The authorities on Aruba have said that they could not corroborate any of the statements that Yoran made during that confession.
After the recording was released, Yoran's lawyer argued that whatever was said on it was irrelevant.
The evidence, not Yoran, the evidence said college. And he winds up in Bangkok. He's going to school there, but he's also running this coffee shop, having seemingly a great life as a playboy.
He'd get broke, he needed money, he'd call the media. He'd say, listen, I know you can't pay me for my story, but I got some photos that you could license, and in addition to licensing the photos, I'll tell you my story. $10,000 to $25,000 seems to be his going rate.
I went to Thailand chasing Joran Vandersloot, and he met me in Thailand. Maybe I should ask you, what do you ultimately want out of this?
I guess for it just all to be over. That's it. Just for me to be able to get on with everything and feel okay. That's what I ultimately want out of it.
What happened to Natalie? I mean, that's the big question. Joran told me that in February of 2005, he was gambling, and he ran into this guy who said, find me an American blonde, and I'll give you $10,000.
And then he said to meet him at the beach by the Marriott if I ever got a girl, and then he would give me $10,000.
3 months later, he meets Natalie, and he wants money because he's low on money for gambling.
Went to the beach with her. Then I saw a guy, and he came, and he just handed me a bag, grabbed the girl by the arm, and he went to the boat that he had in the water.
He said that he had actually sold Natalie into sexual slavery.
Whether that's a plausible story or not, who knows? If Yoran's lips are moving, he's lying.
I was at the airport in Thailand, waiting to board my 15-hour flight back to the United States. Yoran called me at the airport and told me that he'd made it all up. He is a pathological liar. But, even pathological liars can sometimes tell you the right story. And that's the problem, is which one do you believe?
February 10, 2010, his father, Paulus, drops dead at the Aruba Racket Club, playing tennis.
Yoran goes back for the funeral and he stays. And he's idle. So he does what Euron did before. He starts to gamble.
And Euron decides that he needs money to continue living the lifestyle that he's leading.
Euron contacted me.
He says, if you give me $250,000, I will give you information on the whereabouts of Natalie Holloway.
I'm in the Marriott waiting for him when the knock on the door comes.
The FBI is monitoring him. It seems like it's a done deal.
So how does he slip out of Aruba to Peru with my 25 grand? How did he do that? He will strike again.
The murder of Stephanie Flores is 5 years to the day of the disappearance of Natalie Holloway.
Ron Vandersloot killed Stephanie Flores, bringing her coffee when she's dead in the room. What is that? That's a monster. This is where Natalie lost her life, on this island.
You have overstayed your bloody welcome in our island!
People couldn't get enough of the Natalie Holloway story.
Was just crying and begging God to give her back.
Are you guilty? Euron has long been a suspect. The suspect.
Euron Vandersloot was not someone who was making cookies with his mom and dad, if you know what I mean.
He is a pathological liar.
Why isn't he arrested?
The local newspapers are calling him a serial assassin.
He's got a 3-day head start.
Tell me what happened, and let me take her home. What goes off in my body but a bomb?
In 2010, people have presumed that Natalie Holloway has died, and that we'll probably never know how or where.
Beth never gave up, but she had absolutely no idea what happened to her daughter. It was some mystery, shrouded in a small island far away from home.
Nearly 5 years after Natalie has disappeared, Euron reaches out.
Euron contacted me the first time on March 29, 2010.
According to John Kelly, Euron sends an email using a pseudonym, and when he contacts them out of the blue, it's mind-blowing.
We engaged in a series of emails.
John Q. Kelly says Euron has a proposal. If you give me $250,000, I will give you information on the whereabouts of Natalie Holloway.
$25,000 up front. He'll take me to where Natalie is and tell me how she died once and for all.
To actually have the audacity to offer Beth Holloway this information in exchange for money is almost like beyond what you can fathom.
Euron's a gambler, and that's probably the most important thing to know about him. Everything in life is a game to him.
John Kelly says Euron wants $25,000 up front, and then he'll tell where Natalie Holloway's body is.
He wanted money, I wanted information.
Euron provides a bank account number, and that's where they should wire the rest of the money, and then he'll have time to leave the island.
2010, Beth did not know. I'm in the Marriott waiting for him. The knock on the door comes. We proceed into the room. He started talking about how she was nearby. I started asking him a little bit how I know he was telling the truth. He just kept saying, you gotta pay to play. And I said, what if Beth doesn't want to play? And he just said, she can wait 5 more years. I don't care.
Well, Euron thinks only about Euron.
It wasn't about Natalie. It wasn't about, families. Euron and I were now engaged in the game. After Euron left, I felt it was time to let Beth know I was on Aruba.
I thought, okay. He wants $250,000 trying to sell me her remains. As sick and cruel as that sounds, what can we do with this?
A couple days pass, and Beth Holloway is not going to let this go.
I thought, yeah, right. This is really his bank account. And I thought, well, I'll see. So I gave it a test to see if it was real.
They get a call from a local Regions Bank down in Birmingham, Alabama, that Holloway, sent an international wire for $100 to Joran Vandersloot. And
I've always wanted to see if there's a chance he's ever telling the truth. Well, that time it was because it involved money.
So when bankers see this transaction between Beth and him, Kelly says they become concerned that she's possibly being extorted.
And that call from the bank officials in Birmingham gives John Q. Kelly an idea. So maybe we can get Joran on wire fraud charges, on blackmail.
I was like, if we can ever get him to talk about this again, he's committing federal crimes and we'll have jurisdiction. I called Beth. I said, Beth, I've got a plan.
Working with the FBI, they orchestrate a sting operation.
Joran has long been a suspect. The suspect. And if the FBI can get Joran on charges in the United States, that would be a big step.
Joran Vandersloot wouldn't be charged with murder, but he could potentially be charged with wire fraud and extortion.
It was going to be a win-win situation. Either A, I would find Natalie's remains, or B, he'd spend the rest of his life in an Alabama prison. And I kind of like that.
So I sent Joran a one-line email saying that we're ready to do business with you. It was like a fish hitting bait. He couldn't get the response off fast enough. I get the $10,000 cash from Beth to take down to Aruba. She has the $15,000 for the wire transfer. Let's record it. I get down here. They wire me up. I give him a call to come over and take the $10,000 out of the safe, put it on the table in front of him, and it was, like Christmas. He was so excited to see that money.
I wired the $15,000 to the bank account of Joran's choice.
We weren't just handing him over money stupidly. It was for a federal charge that carried 20 years. We leave the hotel and he directs me to a location very close by. So we pull in there, we pull in as far as we can.
Joran tells John a chilling story and says, I took Natalie here, we were messing around, and I wanted to go home, she wanted to go somewhere else.
So he physically picks her up and she's screaming, saying, let me down, put me down. He says he then throws her down.
She hit her head on one of these big rocks, smashing her head, and he knew instantly she was dead.
John Kelly says that Joran takes John to a spot where he says Natalie's body is.
We go to the Aruba Racket Club. He gets out, walks up along this wall, and then finally stops and points over the wall at the house.
He points there and says, this is where Natalie was buried, in the foundation of that house by my father.
It was a stunning moment. Joran Vandersloot is actually implicating his own father, who by now is dead, in Natalie Holloway's disappearance.
Joran has taken the money. Seems it's a done deal.
Everyone's excited, saying, finally, we might be able to get Joran Vandersloot to the U.S. and charged with this crime.
So not long after the money exchange, Joran sends John Kelly an email saying, I lied to you. Nothing was the truth.
I sent that to the FBI too, and I'm like, would you please go pick him up? This is all you need.
With all eyes on Joran Vandersloot, somehow he manages to get away. And he turns up in a place that no one would ever expect.
I thought, what is he doing in Peru?
Beth Holloway thought she finally had Joran Vandersloot on those charges of wire fraud and extortion. But then he slips away from Aruba to Peru.
I expected Joran was going to be arrested.
The FBI really pushed back on the idea that they let Joran slip away. They stated that they just didn't have enough evidence to issue a warrant for Joran's arrest.
I don't even know which reporter it was called me and said, do you have any comment about Joran being the object of an international manhunt?
Vandersloot, once suspected in the disappearance of Natalie Holloway in Aruba, is being sought as a suspect in the death
Police
of
say
a
he
woman in
murdered
Peru.
21-year-old Stephanie Flores.
Tonight,
Rage.
he's the subject of an international manhunt.
The news is stunning. To hear that Joran Vandersloot may have killed another young woman 5 years to the day after the disappearance of Natalie Holloway.
Stephanie Flores was the only daughter in a family of boys, and she was truly her father's pride and joy.
Ricardo Flores is a well-known figure in Peru. He's a former race car driver.
He had been a politician.
Stephanie and her father had a very tight bond. She wanted to be a businesswoman and an entrepreneur like her father, and he fostered that.
They were cut from the same cloth, and everybody in the family knew that.
On June 2nd, 2010, Stephanie Flores has been missing for 3 days. Her distraught family has been searching everywhere. And then sadly, she is found dead by an employee in the hotel TAC.
There are 7 floors in the hotel TAC. All of them have video cameras.
The hotel surveillance video released by the Peruvian government actually shows Joran Vandersloot had rented the room.
From the moment Joran walked into the hotel with Stephanie, they're captured on video.
You could tell that there were 2 people that went in that room, and only one of them came out alive.
When they initially went to the room, nobody had been in the room in days. A stench of death filled the air.
When we got to the crime scene, we found a woman lying with her knees pressed to her chest. The violence of the scene made us think that this victim tried to defend herself.
Initially, they thought she had been stabbed to death because there was so much blood in that hotel room. But an
This guy destroyed her face. She was totally disfigured.
all clues point to Joran as the killer.
His fingerprints are everywhere. There are cigarette butts, there are soda bottles, coffee cups, all presumably containing DNA.
Investigators initially presumed that she was killed because he wanted to rob her.
Going back and looking at the surveillance footage, it was discovered that Stephanie and Joran had had several encounters in the casino. And Joran would have been well aware that Stephanie had won some fairly big jackpots.
So there's reason to suspect that he wanted that cash, and he targeted her. And that's why authorities think he took her to his hotel room to rob her.
Police say after he killed her, Joran set out trying to cover his tracks.
He tries to open the door to the possibility that maybe someone else has killed Stephanie. He makes this, I call it the bogus coffee run. He goes to a place called Holly's Coffee. He gets 2 cups of coffee. He goes back to the room, and just within minutes, he comes back out of the room and pretends he's locked himself out. He needs somebody from the front desk to come and open the door. So the person who opens the door, Joran is hoping is going to walk into the room and discover Stephanie's body. They just open it a little crack.
He wanted to build an alibi, to create this illusion that someone else or other people forced their way into his room and killed Stephanie Flores.
15 minutes later, he walks out, he's got a bag, and drives off into the night.
The murder of Stephanie Flores was 5 years to the day from Natalie Holloway's disappearance. Is that just a coincidence? Or is he that evil?
It is so eerie that we have images of Stephanie at this poker table with Joran, when just 5 years earlier, he was at a poker table with Natalie Holloway.
Some people have said, well, you know, Beth, if you hadn't sent him that $25,000, he probably wouldn't have had the money to go to Peru and then kill Stephanie. Well, hell no. I did everything I knew to do, and whoever was responsible for letting Iran leave that island of Aruba, they are the ones that have to sleep at night over Stephanie Flores' death, not me.
Now you're in Vandersloot, Peru.
The police do not have a clue where Joran is.
Wherever he is, he's got a 3-day head start.
It's almost like a needle in a haystack.
He's in the wind. Joran wants to get out of Peru. He knows that he's left a body in a hotel, that the police are soon going to be bearing down on him. As he winds up in Iga later that night, it's at least a several-hour drive from Lima. He's dressed like a tourist. He looks like a tourist.
He walks up to this driver, a taxi driver, and he asks if he can give him a ride to a town called Nazca.
It was around 9 p.m. when she says to me, "I'll pay for the whole car. Can you take me?" And I said, "It would cost 100. He said, "No problem. I will pay, but let's go now. I'm in a rush." So I left from the station with him on the way to Nazca. On the road, we were talking. I started asking him questions. He said he was from Holland, that he came here to visit some friends, and that he wanted to go to Nazca because he was going to meet his friends there. It takes 2 hours to drive from Ica to Nazca.
The taxi driver, Willie, drops him off in Nazca at the bus station.
He paid for the ride. Everything was normal so far.
About 20 minutes later, Joran reappears. Joran says, "I need another ride."
For some reason, Joran changes his mind about taking the bus.
I asked what happened. He told me, "My friends left me. I have to keep going to Tacna."
And Tacna's near the Chilean border. It's a full 10-hour drive.
Willie has a brother who also drives a taxi, and the two of them confer, and they agree that they will drive Joran down to Tacna for a price.
Joran has offered them something like $500 to make this drive, which is a pile of money to these guys.
Joran was offering them basically a month's salary for a one-day drive. That would be incentive enough to agree to this journey.
They get into Osvaldo's minivan, and they embark on this 10-hour drive to a town near the Chilean border.
It was around 1 a.m. when we started driving, and then the sun was coming up, and we were still driving.
Joran would smoke a lot. He would lower the window and smoke.
I even asked him, "Why do you smoke so much?" And he said it was his vice, smoking cigarettes.
Because he was in a hurry. He didn't want us to stop. He just wanted to buy the newspaper.
Clearly, he's wanting to see, is he in the news yet? He's anticipating a border crossing, and it's best if nobody knows his identity.
We got to Tacna. It was around 10 a.m. or so. He went to a bank and he said that there was no way to take his money out.
He holds up a bank card and says, "This bank card will only work at machines on the other side of the border. If you can drive me into Chile, I'll make sure you get paid, I promise you." One can only imagine what Joran must have been going through when he gets to the border crossing. It's an actual border. It's a modern facility. The border personnel are inspecting his documents. His heart must have been racing. This is the moment where he's either going to be captured by the Peruvians or he's going to through the border.
The Iran believed that police could not reach him once he was in another country.
They stamp his passport, and he's able to drive into Chile.
He crosses the border, and he's gone.
Police say Vandersloot is now on the run. Dutch police say Interpol has issued an international arrest warrant.
When police discover that Joran has left the country, that he's now in Chile, they let the Flores Flores family know?
Ricardo Flores is angry, and he holds a press conference where he shows Joran's picture saying, "This is my daughter's killer." He wants to shine as bright a light as he possibly can on his daughter's murder.
I'm not going to sleep until this man is in Peru. Once the authorities have him, then I can rest.
Stephanie's father can sadly sympathize with Beth's pain.
If you don't have your daughter's body, if you don't know where your daughter is, if you don't know that her killer has been sentenced, you can't rest in peace.
Stephanie's funeral was an incredibly emotional scene.
Her four brothers carrying her casket. Her mother clinging to a stuffed animal that was clearly beloved by Stephanie.
Somewhere in the middle of all this pain and all this grief comes word that Joran had been captured in Chile.
We begin this morning with a top story. Joran Vandersloot, now in custody in Peru, being transported to the capital of Lima.
While he's on the run, a toll booth operator actually recognizes Vandersloot's face and knows he's wanted for murder, calls in a tip, and that gives police the opening they've been looking for to capture him.
Joran was flown to the border between Chile and Peru, where he was examined by doctors. Next stop, the capital of Lima.
Now, a long line of police vehicles is winding its way up the highway, lights flashing, sirens blaring. Inside one of those SUVs, wearing a bulletproof vest, is a young man who is very far away from home.
He gets out of the car, he poses for the cameras, he seems relaxed. He's coming to his own.
While he's in custody, he gets a very unexpected visitor.
I walked through by myself with all the girlfriends and mothers, and that was the first time I'd seen Joran since that night at the Holiday Inn Hotel. And now he's finally in prison. Tell me what happened.
Joran's captured in Chile, and they quickly bring him back to Peru and charge him with murder. On the same day Joran's arrested, the U.S. Attorney and FBI have a joint news conference down in Birmingham.
This morning, my office obtained an arrest warrant for Joran Vandersloot, based upon a complaint charging him with extortion and wire fraud. I want to stress at the outset that our case is not related in any way to the ongoing murder investigation in Peru.
They want him extradited to American soil. The Peruvian authorities say, no way. He murdered one of our own. We're going to put him on trial here. And perhaps after he serves his time in a Peruvian prison, then maybe we'll extradite him to the U.S.
Murder trumps wire fraud and extortion, no question about it.
Unlike in Aruba, where there was absolutely nothing to tie him to Natalie's disappearance, the police in Peru now had a treasure trove of evidence, and all of it linked Joran directly to this crime.
Detective Juan Cayenne loosens him up, offers. Cayenne says, Joran, I understand you're a pretty good gambler. I like to gamble too. Let me show you my cards. And he starts laying crime scene photographs out on the desk. Fingerprints, DNA, blood evidence, stills from the surveillance camera. This is my hand.
He admitted everything he did. How he went to the room. How he started hitting her. How he took all the money and how he fled with her belongings. Joran, he narrated every detail of how he killed her.
Joran makes one last-ditch effort to make it seem as though it was self-defense in some way.
He says that Stephanie started around on his computer, and he had gotten a message on Facebook about this case back in Aruba where this girl went missing, and she got really upset. And Joran says at that point, she elbows him in the face. He flew into a rage.
He, out of anger and rage, reacted and murdered her.
Breaking news overnight, the prime suspect in the Natalie Holloway case confesses to murdering that young woman he took to his hotel room in Peru.
It's huge news. The international press has descended on Lima, Peru. We were sent down to Peru to cover it.
So, Joran, we're with ABC News in the U.S. Joran, you have anything to say to us, Joran?
They send him to a place called Castro, and it's just on the outskirts of Lima, and it was pretty horrifying.
It's a very dangerous prison. You had to pay for your own security. A stench, horrible. There's sewer running freely. It was hard to just stand outside the prison walls, much less go inside.
¿Cómo se llama usted, señor?
Alex,
Alex, mucho gusto. We talked our way into the prison, and to my surprise, they allowed me to see the exact cell where Joran was being held. Joran is being held in an isolated block of cells. There are about 5 of them here. This is his room, about 6 feet by 10 feet. His bed, a bunk, a mattress over concrete. This is his sink and the toilet. These are Joran's clothes. His neighbor, an assassin for hire from Colombia. A few months after Joran is arrested, Beth Holloway goes down to Peru with Peter de Vries, this Dutch journalist.
I wanted to go to Peru to meet with Stephanie's family. The Flores family and I, we share this same bond. Would you please, just share with your mother that, sorry for me to say it, I'm crying, so but I'm just thinking about you and praying for your family, okay? It's not a bond you want, but it's a bond that exists.
While she's in Peru, Beth and the Dutch journalist Peter de Vries come up with a plan for her to finally confront Joran van der Sloot while he's behind bars.
I walked through by myself with all the girlfriends and mothers and lovers who were standing in line for that visitation day, and one of the wardens there took me in his office, and then we set up the meeting with Joran. You don't need to lose your life here in prison and be sitting here when you're 60 years of age and insisting to me that you don't know what happened. Tell me what happened and let me take her home.
It's always been my problem. I've never listened. I've had a lot of time here also now to think and do other stuff. I really do want to write you. I just need some time to think about what I want to say.
That was the first time I'd seen Joran since that night at the Holiday Inn Hotel when he came up to the car. And I thought, wow, this is where I'm leaving Joran. That he was now where I wanted him to have been 5 years ago. It was so glorious.
Nearly 2 years after Joran was arrested in Chile, he appears in court.
Right up until the very end, I think that he somehow felt that he could negotiate something for himself.
As an attorney, I can say that there was a pretty solid case against Joran. And our mission as the defense was to work to get what was best for him.
Everybody was gathered outside of the courthouse, the media. Joran was in the courtroom.
Joran surprises everyone. He pleads guilty.
Culpable o inocente.
Desde el primer momento siempre has dado una confesión sincera y
Joran has been lying so much. You would presume he was going to fight it and challenge it, but he accepts a deal and gets 28 years in prison.
According to his lawyers, he's surprised by this. He's very unhappy, but there's nothing he can do. He's going to serve that time in prison.
Is it the justice I wanted? No, but it's the justice I'll take.
His life in prison isn't what anybody would expect.
Joran was still garnering attention from certain types of women. Seems he married one of them.
And on her big day, Joran's bride shows up outside the gates of the prison, decked out in her white wedding gown.
Joran Vandersloot, the man suspected in the disappearance of Natalie Holloway in Aruba nearly 7 years ago, has been sentenced to 28 years in prison.
His life in prison isn't what anybody would expect.
He told me at one time that he could play online gambling. He had a cell phone for a while. He called me.
Joran not only survived, but thrived. And shockingly, he ended up getting married.
Lady Figueroa, who was an accountant visiting some relative at the prison, he charms her. They start dating, if you will, within the prison walls, and before you know it, she's pregnant.
He just fell in love. There were many people who said that Joran was marrying to avoid extradition to the U.S. That's not true. He simply fell in love with the lady.
It's almost kind of obscene to imagine that this killer manages to get married, impregnate this woman, have a daughter, while still in prison.
By now, Natalie Holloway has been missing for close to 12 years, but her mom, Beth, says her emotional roller coaster has never let up.
In the summer of 2017, Oxygen aired a 6-part series called The Disappearance of Natalie Holloway, which followed Dave Holloway around as he tried to solve the mystery of his daughter's disappearance.
But that series would actually lead to Beth's filing a lawsuit for $35 million against Oxygen and against the producers of the show. While they were making the show, Beth's ex-husband, Dave, asks her for a sample of her DNA.
All of a sudden, I get a phone call. It found human female remains.
She alleges that Dave told her that human female remains had been discovered in Aruba.
So I'm thinking, wow, this is real. I remember just running to swab my cheek to give him my DNA.
Beth says she didn't even know this was for a TV show at that point.
I don't feel right now against just this combined bone profile that it's a match. Comfortably, this is still inconclusive.
The mother of Natalie Holloway suing over that TV series, calling the series fake and saying it was bogus from the start.
Beth's suing for fraud, among other things, and says what the show actually found wasn't female human remains at all, but the top of a pig skull. Oxygen and the producers deny all of Beth's claims and ask for the case to be dismissed. A judge in Alabama rejected that.
A lawyer for Oxygen and the producers sent us a statement saying, in part, neither Oxygen nor BG Media intend the lawsuit is meritless.
To find out it was just a cruel hoax. That entertainment show, at my expense, my life that I had rebuilt was blown up again. So destroyed once again. And I thought, wow, so where do you begin from here? People can cope for so long, but a person can only take so much. How can I begin to heal once again emotionally? And it led me to the Red Barn. I began reading about the work that they do with disabilities and post-traumatic stress, and I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start service to heal my soul. To come here and to be with the horses and to be with the children and see the benefits of the equine therapy. That's why I wanted to do this and go back to Aruba again, because I feel like I couldn't have done this any earlier. I couldn't have done this even a year ago. Aruba has become a lot less significant to me. It's interesting how all these landmarks that were such a driving force in our search for Natalie are just, I mean, they're gone. Carlos and Charlie's is gone. I mean, this whole area is gone. I have come to the terms that this island doesn't hold anything over me anymore.
While she's in Aruba, Beth decides to go back to Joran's house just to see if his mom, Anita, might talk to her again.
I've met with Anita early on in 2005. I knew she had expressed to me they had had difficulty with Ron and maybe some anger and behavior management issues. I just wondered what her take on him is now.
Beth Holloway's is a face that everybody in Aruba knows, so it doesn't take long before police show up.
Just trying to find out, just kind of circling back. Well, just respect that.
It turns out Anita isn't even home, so Beth leaves her a note, and as of tonight, she says she's heard nothing back.
As long as Joran Vandersloot is sitting in prison in Peru, then I can be at peace with justice being served.
There's the speculation that Joran could end up in a U.S. jail.
He's terrified of U.S. And I still get emails from the prison from Joran Vandersloot because, frankly, I haven't given up the story.
In the surplus of lies he tells, that there is a shred of truth, and he knows what happened to her and how it happened. As it stands right now, Joran's serving a 28-year sentence. Once his sentence is completed in Peru, he cannot be released. He has to be transferred into U.S. custody and extradited to the U.S.
So he'll be there till he comes to Alabama. That sounded good to me.
The fact is, hanging over his head is this extradition, so it's a cloud that you can imagine he worries about.
So 14 years later, Aruba has become a lot less significant to me than how it really held me captive in all of my hurt and pain.
Alta Vista was a church that kind of served as a place of peace and hope and serenity in all the chaos that was going on at the time.
I visited every morning and every night. It was my place to recenter and to try to regroup and to refocus.
It was the place that Beth told us that she came to peace, that Natalie was in heaven.
It was when I got to about the 6th cross. That's when I knew Natalie was gone. I knew that Natalie was with God, and He cared for her through whatever ordeal she encountered that night. Every time I looked out at the ocean, I couldn't handle it. And it just disturbed me greatly because it made me feel as if I was never going to get an answer as to what happened to Natalie. But I feel like I have accomplished a huge feat because I can come back now to Aruba. I can get in the water. It feels good. It feels great. This is where Natalie lost her life. Yes, on this island. You're never going to get over the loss of losing your loved one. That's not going to happen.
There's Hootie.
But life does move on. Natalie would want us to enjoy what life we have left.